This is Gene Monterastelli, and welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast recorded live to tape from Williamsburg in Brooklyn. This is episode 631, originally aired October 2nd, 2024. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds you well wherever you are and whatever time of day you're getting a chance to listen to this. Thanks for spending a little time with me today. So I have been connected to and thinking about tapping for close to 20 years. It's a very, very important part of my life. Even before I did it professionally, even before I was creating resources, it was something I used on the regular. And one of the very, very first voices I ever heard in tapping was the voice of Carol Look. Carol Look is one of the founding EFT masters and has been sharing this amazing tool set for more than 2 decades. At this point, I am lucky enough to call Carol not only a colleague, but a friend, as we've had lots of opportunities to work together over the years. And depending on when you're listening to this, very, very soon, we are on the precipice of Carol releasing her new book called The Yes Code. I was fortunate enough to get a copy of the book ahead of time to get a preview of it, and it is absolutely wonderful. The thing I love about the book is it is an amazing step-by-step process to help you to figure out what are those things that are resisting the action that you want to take. If you've spent any time with my content at all, you know that I am super practical in my approach. I'm not just about tapping, I'm about tapping that creates change. And this book is absolutely beautiful as it lays out a step-by-step process for that. In anticipation of the book, I was able to grab a few minutes of Carol's time to talk about the book. But more importantly, because talking about book is fine, I love the creative process and I love all of the amazing things that we learn in the process. So not only are you going to get a sneak peek of some of the absolutely amazing insight in the book, you're going to get a chance in this conversation to hear how tapping has transformed and how this particular process has transformed Carol, not just professionally, but personally in her own work. So here is my conversation with my friend, Carol Look. Before we dive into the process and the integration and how we uncover all of this stuff, what is significant about, for you, the word yes or the feeling of yes? And why is that something that is aspirational or something that we should be looking for?
I would call it alignment. So saying yes when you feel yes, rather than what so many of us have taught to do, say yes when you think it's a no, right? Say no when it should be a yes. Please others, do something for somebody else, and we just lose our center. So the idea of coming to yes and really getting grounded with that has just been so important in my life and with my clients.
And what I really like about that is what you're getting to is we're not talking about a word, we're talking about a disposition and being at a place where it's not what I'm saying, but what is resonating with me.
Absolutely. Not just the word, but whole body, right?
Yeah.
Body, mind, and spirit all connected and together, right?
And as I think about that, I think of, the idea that our friend Gwyneth Moss shared with me years and years ago, but when she was doing traffic light tapping, just this really intrigue, is it a red light? Is it a yellow light? Is it a green light? And giving ourselves this chance to kind of look into that particular thing in a visceral way and knowing what that feels like. And so with that, it's one thing to pay lip service to that particular thing. It's another thing to know what that feels like. And so in your body, what does yes feel like for you when you have, how do you know you are in alignment with something?
It's so interesting because I had to practice this because I assumed that a yes would be loud and dramatic and special.
Yeah.
And instead, a yes for me is very clean, very quiet, and very quick. I know that. And then a no is the agitation and the maybe and the sometimes, and I'm not sure, and what about this factor, and tossing it around, and I don't know. That's a no. And I always say, yes is yes, no is no, and a maybe is a no for now. Do not respond or act on a maybe. So I had to really go inside and practice and say, is that a yes or is that a not quite sure? So it's a great question. Everybody has to find their own, because somebody else might have a dramatic lightning bolts yes when I don't. Mine was just
And I think it's really good to give folks permission to have that personalized sense. I was recently working with a client on public speaking, and I'm like, how do you want to feel when you're speaking in public? I'm like, not afraid. I'm like, no, that's great. We don't want to be afraid, but do you want to be confident? Do you want to be grounded? Do you want to be leading? Do you want to be conducting energy? Like for you, if this was going great, what does that feel like? And you could literally just see them kind of go, I never thought about it in that particular way. And so I love the fact that you're saying, for me, it was a surprise and this is what it is. And giving us all permission to go, okay, great. Feel internally and play around and try and figure out what does that mean for you as you're engaging with this particular thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so then if we have this sense of yes and what that feels like, what then gets in the way of us being able to feel that or being safe feeling that or engaging with that? Like it's one thing to know what the thing I'm desiring is, but it's another thing to like be able to figure out what is in the way between here and there. I can see the distance, but how do we start to parse that particular thing that's in the way?
Yeah. What I say to people is I remind them that self-sabotage and getting in your own way is serving a purpose. It's keeping you safe or you wouldn't do it. And many times people say, I never knew that. I just have been beating up on myself for it. And so once I ask them what you were just saying, what is it that you really want? Yeah, I don't want to be in debt anymore. I know, but what do you really want? Well, I don't want to be in this relationship anymore. It's not helpful for me. Okay, what do you want? Once I get that, then I'll say to them, what's the upside of keeping a lid on yourself? What's an upside of that? Oh, there is an upside? What's the downside of getting the success or getting that thing that you've just described that you want? What could be a downside? And it flips the whole script on them. And they start to figure out, that's how you figure out what is in the way. So we know that if you're sabotaging, you're in your way. Why would you do that when you keep saying you want something? You want something different. You want success. You want a different job. You want a different mate. You want a different, more money, whatever it is. But you do have to do that work to find it out. Otherwise, I think our culture is obsessed with the behavior. Change the behavior. Lose the weight. Stop the clutter. Start doing a marketing program. And people get stuck with those too. That's how you know it's not connected to the behavior. You've got to go behind the behavior. For the feelings and the beliefs, and you got to find out what you're doing it for. What's the positive reason that you're in your own way?
And I think one of the things that's really insightful inside of that particular thing is oftentimes the thing that we think is the outcome that we're desiring is a symptom and a consequence of the outcome that we are desiring. Is to be in this circle, like, I want this thing. Well, no, I don't, in like, for those of us in the transformational space, like sometimes we go the opposite. It's like, well, I want self-esteem. I'm like, great. How do you know you have self-esteem? When it comes to when we name an outcome, oftentimes we're doing the opposite of that. It's like, I would like to have this thing, but that's an outgrowth. Like, I don't have wealth. Having wealth is an outgrowth of disposition, action, presence, letting go of, and that sort of thing. And so I think it's really keen that you're like identifying that particular piece of it.
That piece of it. And also people will sometimes ask me, Jean, they'll say, well, how do I know if I'm getting in my own way? How do I really know that I'm blocking myself? And I say, look at your results. How are you doing with your results? Oh, I'm not happy here. I'm not happy. Okay, so what do you want instead? Right? And you just start that process of getting, if someone says, I want self-esteem, well, what do you have now? And what is it about having self-esteem that you think will make you feel better? What are you talking about? And then you can start unpacking all those layers.
Yeah. And one of the things really early on in my own transformation was I came to this revelation one day, like of what you're talking about here, of if it wasn't for resistance to change, the change already would have happened. Because like so many of the changes that I wanted to have happen in my life at that point in my life, I knew how to do it. I knew what to do, and I had the resources to do it, and I had the want to for the change. Like all of the prerequisites were there, and change was not happening. So the only culprit that was left was whatever was going on inside of me. And so, like, you're asking that question, how do I know there's resistance to change? All of this stuff was there, and change wasn't happening. So obviously, something was existing in that particular way.
And haven't you seen that our culture is over-focused on stop the procrastination, stop doing this, and it doesn't last, right? Clean up your car. 2 weeks later, it's still a mess. Lose the 20 pounds. 2 months later, you've gained it back. So we know that we've got to get to the deeper layers and look at the landscape and say, what's going on here? I keep telling people I want this, and I have the resources, as you're saying. I've got the means, everything's going great, and I'm still not doing it.
Yeah. I mean, because we can, with willpower, depending on how many cups of coffee I had and how good of night sleep I had the night before,
Right.
I can muscle my way through resistance for a period of time. But I really like this idea of alignment, because if I'm in aligned, then it becomes a consequence of where I'm coming from. It is not a thing that I am pushing to. It is not a thing that I'm trying to create. It's the natural outgrowth of where I am standing.
It feels easy. It's
Yeah.
not pushing. It's not willpower. It's not, okay, I promised myself I would do this in the next hour. It's not making a to-do list even. It's like, well, that is the next right step, and I know it. And then we bump into the other blocks, which is, if I'm aligned and say yes to the following, who's going to be upset? Who's going to be annoyed with me? Who might be jealous? Who's going to have a reaction? What am I so worried about if I, in fact, follow the path and get what I want? Then what? There's a lot of then whats we have to look at.
Yeah, one of the things I've been playing around a lot with my clients is 4 kind of entry points into this, and the second one is allowed. I am not allowed to do this thing because, and oftentimes that allowed is all of those things that you're talking about. It's not the thing itself, it's the consequences that exist in my family, in my community, in my job, in the way I see myself. I'm not allowed to do that because Gene's this type of person, and that's outside of that particular scope of thing. And so recognizing that, like, I can be in a circumstance where internally it feels safe for me, then there's this part of me that engages in community around me that goes, ooh, no, it's not actually safe in community, because the community is going to wag their finger in that particular way.
Exactly. And I always tell people to test it. So sometimes I'll say, go inside, think of the success you want. How does it feel? What's the block, et cetera. And then I'll say, now imagine yourself on the stage or on the podcast or having the new relationship and your friends don't. And what happens? And they get a different reaction. They get something in their body that says, no, don't go that far. I need to put a lid back on myself. So they can sometimes do it internally, but imagining it publicly, you get more information.
Yeah. So we're kind of dancing around it here. I'm sure as you've been thinking about this, and maybe you wouldn't use the word taxonomy, but like, is there a group of frames that you are thinking of when you're thinking of resistance, instead of just like, there is resistance that is holding me back? Like, do you have lenses? Do you have gauges? Do you have like ways of breaking it down so I can, we got into it a little bit there. It's like, I'm having to think someone else is seeing me. But like, when you're thinking about that, how do you think about the types and categories of resistance that gives us a lens to go after it?
The first thing is making sure people understand that resistance is what it is. That's what's going on, right? And then I start with the family. So I always say, who in your family might have a problem with that? What's going on? And I write a lot about that in the book because of my family upbringing and what I learned. Who in your family? Then I say, and who in your current life? What do you mean? Spouse, mate, children, friendships, your Friday night group. Who right in your current life could have a problem with that? Then I back them into 10 years ago, high school, 20 years ago, something going on that may have been in a school age group where you specifically got the message. Don't do that. Mm-hmm. Don't stand out. Don't be visible. Sometimes I'll just say, where did you first get the message that it wasn't safe to stand out or wasn't safe to be successful? I'm not really sure. Well, there was that time. I don't know if this is related, is what they all say, right? That's what we all
absolutely. Yeah.
I'm not sure this is related, but I think it was when I was in 6th grade. Yes. And then we have it. We have something. So family first, current life people, people who are surrounding you next. And then is there an incident that starts to ping when we talk about this?
And as you're kind of bumping into there, this probably has nothing to do with it. Like we should just all pay attention to that phrase. Like certainly as a practitioner, it's my favorite phrase in the history of the world, because if it has nothing to do with it, it has everything to do with it. But I also think that just for those of us who are doing transformation on our own, if a memory, a person, a moment comes out of left field whenever I am working on anything. The first thing I do is I write down a title of that thing so I don't lose it. I never tap without a pen and paper nearby just because I know how quickly things come and go. But what you're talking about right there, that if I am ever surprised as I am looking internally, like those are the neon lights that are flashing that are saying, hey, this is the thing we really need to be paying attention to at this particular moment.
It's such a funny phrase, right? I don't think this is related.
Right.
I also do it with a pen and paper. I cannot not take notes when I'm doing it because something will come up and I think, well, it's not special. It's not something I've not thought about in years. I know about that. It's not repressed material, right? Mm-hmm. It's something that's obvious, but is now turned around a little bit. And that's an incident that initially triggered us wanting to keep a lid on ourselves or something like that.
Yeah.
So I love doing that with pen and paper too. It's like, yep, I don't do this on my own because I will not grab it. Right? It'll
absolutely, yeah.
It'll fly past. So yeah, that's fun.
And so then, as we're navigating this process and we're identifying and we're clearing, how does someone know that they are now on the right path of working this out, moving forward, creating, clearing, that sort of stuff?
Well, let's say, so I asked the question. So basically the process is, where do you really want to go in your life? Where do you want to be? Where do you want to go? And they start with I don't want this. Yes, but where do you want to go? Then I ask the question. So why aren't you there yet? And there's the clearing. Then we do all the clearing with the tapping. Then you're checking on how do you feel about, let's use success. How do you feel about the next level of your success now? Mm-hmm. And usually it's down. 90% of the time it's different and the number's down. And what do you think your next step is? And if they get scared about the next step, we have more tapping to do in between them, because what I want it to do for them is get to your next yes. So that's the third step of the yes code is like, so we start with, where do you want to go? Here are the questions to find out why you're not there yet. Let's clear, right? Yeah. Then what's your next step? And usually they're very clean and comfortable. And, I know what my next step is because they've shut down the noise. They've quieted the monkey mind and the noise and the you shouldn't because your sister's going to be upset with you. And that's all gone with the clearing. Then they get to the next step and they say, I can do that. And they're very surprised. I know what I need to do next. It's like it drops into them, I know what I need to do next. And if not, it only means there's one more yes but in there. Just means there's something else that's blocking. We are human beings, which means we are made of blocks. Yeah. We're made of emotional blocks and limiting beliefs.
And the way you're describing it, like the image that comes to my mind is like, on some level, there is this thing that I know is the next step that is here in front of me. And there are these panes of stained glass in the way that make it so I can kind of make out its shape and I have a sense of what's there, but I can't access it. And with each one of these things that I'm clearing, it just becomes clearer and clearer for me so that all of a sudden it's like, obviously this is the thing that I do in that particular way.
Right, because you go from a maybe to a clear yes.
And one of the things I think that's really important inside of this, just like for those of us who are engaging in the process and using the process that you lay out in the book, is that it's really hard for us to quantify and remember the things that we have released. Like it's kind of like wearing a pair of shoes that are too tight. And when we take them off, we kind of feel they're there, and 15 minutes later, we can't run. I was working with a client years and years ago around smoking cessation. And he said, Gene, you're not going to believe it. Last night in the news, I saw this story where they showed the inside of a lung. And that's the reason why I quit smoking, is because I saw all that tar inside of the lung. As if he had never seen that before, and as if he didn't know that was the case. Right. But it was like, I've been given new information, therefore I'm acting in this way. And so I think it's really easy for us, I got a chance to read the book already, and looking at a process like that, to forget how valuable a process is like that. Because like you're saying is, all of a sudden when it's a yes, it's like, well, duh, it's an obvious yes for me. And we forget how much we have released. We forget that there were things in the way that now get us there, which for me, that becomes a problem, because when the next obstacle comes up, I don't remember I cleared obstacles in the past. I'm now just like, oh, this doesn't work and I'm stuck.
Yes, I'm stuck. Right. I had that in the other direction as well. When I was a terrible insomniac, it was just part of who I am. Like people, I didn't say, hi, I'm Carol and I have this terrible insomnia problem. It was just me.
Right.
And then when I cleared it with tapping, it was like, oh, that really was a part of my life 7 days a week for years. Oh, but I didn't notice it when I had it because it was so integral to my life. And then when I left, it was like, that's weird. Really? So that memory goes in both directions because we tell a story or we say, this is just who I am. I don't do socializing. I don't do, you name it. So it's important to remember, I don't know, part of the book process was going through everything I've changed with these techniques and with this process, because I'm always my first guinea pig. I don't do anything on anybody that I have not tried on myself. Yep. So I got to go over my history and go and really dig into my family and say, no, why was I such a procrastinator and people pleaser and perfection? Why was I such a perfectionist? Oh, got it. Rather than just clearing, thinking, here I am now, right? Doing well and, forgetting the process, right? Kind of negating the process.
And so in that, I have two questions. I'm going to separate them because I don't want one question to contaminate the other question. So as you were going through this process, what were some of the things that you discovered about yourself that was surprising?
I think the perfectionism, not that I didn't know I had it, not that I didn't know that I've dramatically changed it, but really digging into where it came from. Mm-hmm. So I was raised in an alcoholic family, and in an alcoholic family, you cannot feel like you've done things right.
Right.
I don't care what the personality is of the active alcoholic, you do not think you've done enough. Right. So that gnawing internal sense of, I got to do more and I have to do it perfectly, that's not news to me. I know that. But there was connecting the dots, that happened that was very cathartic and very good for me. And again, it wasn't new news, but it was, okay, I'm really putting it together. Because I would clear things along over the years. I've cleared this, cleared that, done so much work on it, but the through line wasn't always so clear. It was just, I'm presented with a problem. I'm going to clear it with tapping. And sometimes you don't know the exact source or origination of it.
Yeah. And so what I hear in that answer is there's a difference between knowing something about myself and knowing the significance of that thing. Like I can know these facts. Yes, this is my disposition. This is my tendency. This is my history. This is where it came from, which is different than understanding how it is impacting me in the moment, in the choices I'm making beyond, I'm just a perfectionist. Like that. That's a really when I'm over functioning and I'm cleaning up the kitchen and somebody notices, it's just, I'm just a perfectionist. Like it's just something that's easy to pass off, but it's really different when I start to go, oh, because of this thing, the significance it has had in my formation and the significance it has in how I'm acting is a really, really different thing.
Very, very different. And, I even put myself through the Yes Code process when I was coming to the conclusion of the book and looking at what happened during the process of writing it. Yep. So I asked myself the questions, where do you really want to go? I want to produce this book and I want to get it out there in a big way. Okay, so I asked myself the questions, and what's the downside of that? My family's going to have a fit when they read what I've written about my family. Now, actually not going to have that much trouble, but I lived it, so it's my story. I get to tell it. Yeah. So I had to clear that during the process, the worries about their reactions, the worries about feedback and criticism about it, like, oh, why would you say that? And then once I cleared that in this process, what's the next step? The next step was get on it, write the next chapter, get it out, get it published. Yep. And it was really fascinating because I was kind of stuck on the conclusion of the book. And it's like, just took myself through the process. I'll tell you exactly what happened. I was scared of my family's reaction. And I'm still concerned about it, but it's not blocking any behavior anymore. I'm going to hear about it, Gene. I'm going to hear about it. And that's okay. They can have their reactions because I have mine.
And what you're talking about there is you're talking about not being free of an emotion, but having a proportionate, well-informed emotional response. I'm aware this is going to happen. I am going to have conversations. It might be difficult to have those particular conversations, which is different than I am not taking action because it is dangerous for me to be in that particular circumstance.
Right. Totally different. And it's a way to move forward. So it's another way to say, hey, notice that you're stuck. Notice you're not doing something that you keep saying you want to do. Clear it out. And then the next step is very obvious, drops in, very clear, very obvious. It's not a maybe anymore. It's like, get this done and put it out there.
And so then the second question is, and like this is something I notice about myself, is that anytime I'm in a circumstance that like the work that I do is implicit. Like when I sit down with a client, I'm not like, okay, this is the 6-step check plan and I'm going to do this. And like because I've been doing this for a very, very long time, like I have grounding, I have fundamentals, I have foundations, like I do things in a structured way, but I'm not accessing those particular things. The moment I have to create a resource or I'm teaching a class on my approach, like recently I taught a class on my approach to inner child work, it forced me to take the implicit and make it explicit, where I'm explaining the details and I'm like, oh yeah, that's actually what I do. Like I discovered things about my own process that were just happening in an intuitive way. You have been working with taking action in abundance and creating change for as long as I have known of your work, which is longer than I've known you, because I was a fan of your work before we were friends. Mm-hmm. What did you discover about your process, your approach, about like what did you learn as a person who is a practitioner, who is a trainer, who is a teacher, who is a helper? What did you learn about this process by having to go through the process of making all of this explicit in words that folks like us can consume?
You know, it really was interesting because my attitude is like, well, you know what I do. Well, you know what I do. You know, I know what I do. I just do this thing, you know. And so to have to spell it out and have an editor work with me on spelling it out, it is different, right? It definitely is different. And I think I found the clarity, the importance of clarity in describing it, but also the importance of clarity and not skipping over anything when you're going through the steps or you're trying to change, because I think human beings can be very general. Oh, you know this thing about success, or people have money problems and they're worried about other people's reactions. No, let's get specific and super clear. When was the person criticizing you for your success? When was that? Who was it? What did they say? What stuck with you? When have you seen it operating in your life? So really going after it, like detailed, instead of this kind of generalized, as I said, assumption, like, you know, this is process and EFT works on everybody. You know how we can get, and we've seen practitioners get that. We're like, oh, tapping works. Well, tapping works for a few really significant reasons. You're specific, you're clear, you choose a great target, you check in, and check in, right?
Yeah, and like, so I have here on my desk a little pre-flight checklist that I read through before every single one of my client sessions, just to make sure I'm reminding myself of what's going on. And number 2 on my little list here is ask one more question. Mm-hmm. Nice. Because like I think quickly and I think I have the answer, so we're going to go to this place. And what you're talking about, like for me, that reminder, like that sense of specificity, and the other piece is like sometimes people have a resistance to tapping because they're like, I can't tap unless I am specific. It's not. It's as specific as possible, and in some cases, specific as possible is just, and that's all I got. But not like giving ourselves permission to start with whatever we got. But what I love what you're saying here is go one more step, get one more detail, step in there. Because I think part of it is that it's scary to have to, and maybe scary is the wrong word. It is discomforting. There is unease that comes along with having to give voice to the specific details of my lived experience. It's one thing to say my childhood was rough. It's another thing to say This was an instance in which I was undermined by someone who I looked up to, and it broke my heart. Like, that's a completely different thing. And like, I love to hear the, like, saying that, oh my gosh, as someone who does this all the time, I learned that, oh yeah, we really need to lean into this particular thing.
Yes. It's so interesting that people have said to me, I was just on a summit last week, and people were writing in, and a couple of them said, oh, EFT hasn't worked for me. Tapping hasn't worked for me. And I worked with one of them specifically on the call and said, and what about this? And what about this? And I kept going. And, to some people, it could seem laborious until I can feel when I'm on it. I can feel when the right target has popped up. And that's what we need to work on. And she wrote in later, she said, this has never worked on me before. Well, it's not me. I'm just being very careful in the process, asking another question and making sure we go there and making sure that they can say those things out loud. I mean, how many times have clients said to you, Gene, I've never said that out loud before?
Yep. I actually shared that. Yeah, I said that same thing to my students recently. It's like, I get this, every week it happens.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And they say, it's not been hidden. It's not something that was a secret or hidden. It's like, I've never put it that way. I've never said it out loud to another human being. I've never thought about it that way. And that's where the clarity starts to really come.
And it's so interesting, like in other aspects of my life, like I'm really good about making myself sit in something. So for example, like when I'm brainstorming, the moment I run out of ideas, like I'm coming up with topics for the podcast or I'm working on new products or whatever it is, the moment I run out of ideas, I then set my watch for 5 minutes, and I'm not allowed to do anything else for 5 minutes and just sit in the silence and just go, well, what else is there? What else is there? What else is there? Because I know there is more there. And sometimes it's not useful, and sometimes it's very, very useful. But like in the creative process, I am forcing myself to sit in it, to give myself the opportunity to do that. I can remember one time I was working with a client, so I'm like, what else? And they answered, I'm again, what else? And they answer, and what else? And literally, I just kept saying, and what else? And what else? And you could see them getting a little frustrated until all of a sudden they went, and like the light bulb went on for them as well. It's like, we've now found the next big thing. And it wasn't even the full thing, but by forcing them to, what else? Like, I love the fact that this isn't, again, like we can have the best tools and approaches in the world, but if we are unwilling to give ourselves the time, the space, and the capacity to truly be reflective to what is there, it doesn't matter how good the tapping tool we are using is in that particular moment.
No. And human beings need safety. I talk about that a lot in the book. We have to be safe. It wins no matter what. We don't have a choice. Human beings, safety is going to win. And so we, of course, hide things from ourselves. We, of course, minimize certain feelings or conflicts that are uncomfortable or awkward or feel terrible to us. So that's just the nature of being a person. So asking, relaxes us next, and another thing. And if there were one more thing, relaxes us next, and they feel the safety of being with you, right? And then they can say, I never thought of it this way. I've never said this out loud.
Yeah, and it's so nice when we give ourselves the opportunity to creep up on something. Like I was recently, a friend of mine was resisting reading the second and the third books in the Dune series because he said, well, I've read the Wikipedia things, it gets too crazy. And my response was, the books are 700 pages long. Yes, if you describe these 700 pages in one paragraph, yes, that's really, really crazy. But over the course of 700 pages, it makes sense. This is the place that we land because the story is gently, and you can see the motivation for every single character choice over these 67 chapters, and it makes sense in the end. And when we're doing that for ourselves and we're giving ourselves permission to just like creep up on it, and it's safer and it's healthier for us to do it in that particular way.
And it's gentle, because if you don't feel safe, you'll say, oh no, I don't know what you're talking about. There's nothing there, is what people say, what we say, right? And so it's just so important to go at the pace that works for you, knowing full well that safety is going to trump everything. Safety is going to be your number one priority.
And for me, like the way I've been describing my work lately is like I live in the ERs, and I don't mean the emergency room, but in better, gentler, easier. Not better, not perfect, not gentle, not easy, but just doing it in that, like one of my single favorite thing about the tapping community in the 20 or so years I've been hanging around with it is so few people talk about 1 session and 1 minute miracles anymore. Like when, 20 years ago, because we were trying to convince people this was a good thing. It's like, oh my God, this amazing thing happened to me in 1 round of tapping. And those things happen. And those things happen regularly for me and my clients. And it's awesome. But it's like not a useful way for us to talk about transformation. The way you're talking about this is not only healthier, it's more useful. And like giving ourselves permission not to be. And the other thing is to recognize like the value of those incremental changes. Like I might not be 100% yes and have that resonance for everything here, but I might have enough resonance to take that next step and do that next action. And as I'm doing that, I can work on getting in alignment for the action that's after that and working on getting in alignment in the action that's after that.
So ultimately, it's more successful to do it that way rather than focus on the 1 minute miracle too. Because as you say, it's not that there aren't 1 minute miracles, and that does happen, but we're not built that way.
Yeah,
because they scare some people. 1 minute miracles trigger the safety issue again.
Sure. And oftentimes the things that we mistake for a 1 minute miracle is the seed that we planted 8 days ago and it grew last night. And we think the plant grew last night. It didn't. It just happened to show up last night. We can now see the consequence of that particular thing where the growth has always been happening. Oftentimes like, oh my gosh, Gene, when you said that one phrase, it was absolutely perfect. Well, it was a good phrase, but it's also the consequence of the last 6 weeks of work that we've been doing around this particular issue. And this is just a culmination where now all of you feel safe to embrace this particular idea.
Yes. One step. And then you look back over a week or a month or a year and you think, oh, I really have come a long way. Like sometimes I'll ask clients that, tell me about the progress you think you've made. And they go, and I can see it, right? I can point it out. But when they have to go inside and say, oh, come to think of it, I really have changed. Then it makes it more real for them.
Well, I actually one time had a client call himself a liar. Where he said, I don't know if we're making any progress. I'm like, awesome. Let me read your intake form back to you. Not the notes I took, what you wrote down. And he goes, I was just exaggerating. It was never that bad. Like, that's how unbelievable it was because the new alignment was so resonant with him. It felt unreal that he was ever out of alignment. Like I must have been exaggerating. There's no way I ever felt that way. Like that's what happens when we get that sense of yes and that sense of alignment. It feels so natural. It's hard to remember not.
He didn't recognize himself, right? He's like, that couldn't have been me.
Yeah.
Had to make
awesome. Yeah.
Oh, so interesting.
Well, like you said, with these, but with these baby steps, and this is the thing I've always appreciated about your work. And when I got an advanced copy of this to look through it, there's just this idea of that, like your approach is so thoughtful and systematic that it holds people's hands through this. Like in a snapshot, everything that we've been talking about for the last 25, 30 minutes can feel super, super overwhelming because it's so much and it's so big. But when we're in a circumstance where you have someone holding your hand like the way you do, giving a really simple process just makes it so much more accessible for everybody involved. So I just want to say, I love the book. Obviously, I wrote testimonial for it ahead of time because I loved it so much. But I just really appreciate it. Like it's such a useful tool for folks to be able to engage in that process in a simple, stepwise, systematic way, so they never feel over their skis or in over their head. So I just want you to know I really appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate that for coming from you, Gene. That means a lot. Means a lot. Thank you.
You bet. And thanks for your time, Carol. I really appreciate you just spending some time with me talking about the process.
Awesome. Always being with you is great.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. If you would like more information about the book, The Yes Code, Carol is doing a very special launch process where she's doing some free training, some tap-alongs, all sorts of really, really good stuff. If you'd like to get more information about the book and how you can participate in the free launch bonuses, all you need to do is go to carollook.com/yes. That's carollook.com/yes. That will also be down in the show notes so that if you want to click on and enjoy that, I would certainly encourage you to do that. If you know someone in your life who could appreciate a conversation exactly like this, please be our ambassador, pass it along. We always joke about the fact that our marketing budget is your word of mouth. And we'd appreciate it if you know someone in your life who could appreciate this conversation, pass it along, even if they don't engage in this particular conversation. The fact you've reached out is going to make a difference in their day because they know someone cares. Yes, that sounds super, super cheesy. It sounds cheesy every time I say it, but it is absolutely true. As you look on the screen right now, you can see the entire podcast archive. All you need to do is click on that playlist. There's lots of great trainings waiting for you, and I look forward to talking with you and tapping with you again real soon. Bye-bye.